Good evening. Hello, everyone. Hey, so this is obviously Sun Tzu on the Art of War. This is a book that a lot of people might imagine that it only deals with warfare, which, yeah, majority of it deals with warfare, but what I think people may not realize necessarily is that there's also good leadership qualities, or what we would hope would be leadership qualities in this book. And so I kind of wanted to read through some of it. I don't really have any passages picked out necessarily because I haven't fully read through The Art of War. But you see his quotes online. Like one of my favorites is "Stop misattributing quotes to me on the internet." Sun Tzu, Art of War. What we're reading here is from the Allendale Online Publishing, translated from the Chinese. I think that's a bit of a typo there. All right, so here we have the credits and everything. The manuscript's public domain, so we don't have to worry about getting sued. So here are our contents. We got laying plans, waging war, attack by stratagem, tactical dispositions, energy, weak points, and strong maneuvering, variation in tactics, the army on the march, terrain, the 9 situations, the attack by fire, and the use of spies. That one is, I have read some of the spy part, and he has some very interesting tactics, which you'll start to see as you read the book. So we have Sun Tzu on the Art of War, Chapter 1, Laying Plans. Sun Tzu said, "The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. The art of war, then, is governed by 5 constant factors to be taken into account in one's deliberations when seeking to determine the conditions obtaining in the field. These are the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, method, and discipline. The moral law causes the people to be in complete accord with their ruler, so that they will follow him regardless of their lives, undismayed by any danger." So if you're confused by what Sun Tzu is saying here, moral law is more or less the morality and morale of your troops, as well as their obedience, their loyalty, and submissiveness. The idea that they would submit to the commander, knowing that they may die, right, undismayed by any danger. All right, heaven signifies night and day, cold and heat, times and seasons. Very straightforward. Earth comprises distance, great and small, danger and security, open ground and narrow passes, the chances of life and death. That one's a little bit more complicated, but when we get to Earth, he starts to expand on it. The commander stands for the virtues of wisdom, sincerely, I think sincerity is the actual word, benevolence, courage, and strictness. By method and discipline are to be understood the marshaling of the army in its proper subdivisions, the graduations of rank among the officers, the maintenance of roads by which supplies may reach the army, and the control of military expenditure. So, if there is any confusion as to what he's saying here. So the graduations of rank among the officers, i.e. their rank and position, what they're in charge of, who they are in charge of. Because if there's confusion on that, if nobody knows who's supposed to be in control of these troops, nobody knows who's supposed to get the supplies out, nobody knows who's supposed to maintain the engineers, you're in trouble. So then there's the maintenance of road by which supplies may reach the army. What we've seen with Russia right now, clearly they're having issues with supplies. The roads themselves are fine, but their supplies are dwindling. And on top of that, the control of military expenditure. That's a big one that's really hit Russia. And on top of that, just any military in general. If you can't keep a tight control on your funds and use them wisely, you're going to run your army into the ground. So these 5 heads should be familiar to every general. He who knows them will be victorious, he who knows them not will fail. Therefore, in your deliberations, when seeking to determine the military conditions, let them be made the basis of a comparison. In this wise, which of the 2 sovereigns is imbued with the moral law? Which of the 2 generals has most ability? With whom lie the advantages derived from heaven and earth? On which side is discipline most rigorously enforced? Which army is stronger? Okay, so I believe what he's talking about, the armies themselves, whether it's choosing between 2 generals and how they run their military, their respective armies, or if it's enemies and allies. So which of these 2 sovereigns is imbued with moral law? Who is more willing to follow their general to the death? Which of these 2 generals has most ability? Which one is, who has the more, how do I put that? Who's more flexible and able to adapt to the changing environment? With whom lie the advantages derived from heaven and earth? So if we go back to heaven and earth, so heaven signifies night and day, cold and heat, times and seasons. Earth comprises distance, great and small, danger, security, open ground, and narrow passes, the chances of life and death. So earth, rather simple. Which general has better control? Which general is in a more tactically advantageous position? Heaven signifies night and day, cold and heat, times and seasons. So which one is better prepared for the weather, essentially? On which side is discipline most rigorously enforced? And which army is stronger? Those 2 are rather straightforward. On which side are officers and men more highly trained? In which army is there the greater consistency both in reward and punishment? These 2 are very important. So you can have an army of 1,000 versus 10,000, and if the 1,000 are far more disciplined and better trained than the 10,000, they win every time. In which army is there the greater consistency, both in reward and punishment? This is huge. Because if you just constantly punish your soldiers, or your Marines, or your seamen, or your airmen, or whatever, right? If you constantly punish them, there comes a point where they give up, essentially. They stop caring, because no matter what they do, they're going to be punished, and they begin to rebel more. Because if I'm going to get punished, no matter what I do, I may as well get my money's worth. Reward is huge, but if you give too much reward, then people become spoiled, and they won't do their basic job because nobody is going to pat them on the back and tell them good job, right? So there has to be consistency in both reward and punishment. Because if you don't punish somebody when someone is wrong, then there's that, how did I put that? They lose faith in the system, and they become more and more reluctant to carry out the job, because what's the point? this person over here didn't do their job and they didn't get punished. So why should I do anything? If somebody does something great and they get rewarded, somebody else does something great and they don't get rewarded, the same thing happens. People begin to debate. Excuse me, drink water. They'll argue with each other. There could be fights over this, and there's a demoralization because it becomes if I do this but I still don't get rewarded, what is the point of doing this? So there's a balance that has to be maintained. By means of these 7 considerations, I can forecast victory or defeat. The general that hearkens to my counsel and acts upon it will conquer. Let such a one be retained in command. The general that hearkens not to my counsel nor acts upon it will suffer defeat. Let such a one be dismissed. While heeding the profit of my heeding the profit of my counsel, avail yourself also of any helpful circumstances over and beyond the ordinary rules. Okay, this one's going to take a little bit of breakdown here. So while heeding the profit of my counsel, avail yourself also of any helpful circumstances. Okay, I believe what he's talking about is that if there's any common sense, how do I phrase that? So if you're listening to these rules, right? If you're following these 7 rules, and then something else comes up that improves your military, or your army, or your group, or your team, because these rules can be applied to just about any situation beyond just warfare. You can add this to a business, to art. Well, I don't like an art team. You can put this in politics. You can put this in just about anything that requires teamwork, right? So if you're listening to these 7 rules, and something else that is helpful that's a rule, right? Something that if you abide by it, it also adds to victory, then absolutely add it to these rules. Follow that as well, right? But it has to be helpful. It can't be something that you think is going to work but then doesn't work out. If it doesn't work out, get rid of it, right? If it becomes harmful, get rid of it. According to the circumstances are favorable, one should modify one's plans. So if something comes up and it's like, hey, this is better, then do it. So I had the train of thought and it left my brain. But accordingly, as circumstances are favorable, one should modify one's plans. All warfare is based on deception. Tzu Art of War. Hence, when able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. When far away, we must make him believe we are near. Hold out baits to entice the enemy. Feign disorder and crush him. If he is secure at all points, be prepared for him. If he is in superior strength, evade him. If your opponent is of choleric temper, seek to irritate him. Pretend to be weak that he may grow arrogant. If he is taking his ease, give him no rest. If his forces are united, separate them. Attack him where he is unprepared. Appear where you are not expected. These military devices leading to victory must not be divulged beforehand. Now the general who wins a battle makes many calculations in his temple ere the battle is fought. The general who loses a battle makes but few calculations beforehand. Thus do many calculations lead to victory, and few calculations to defeat. How much more no calculation at all? It is by attention to this point that I can foresee who is likely to win or lose. Alright, so that was quite a bit that we just went over here. So, let's go back. Underneath, all warfare is based, right? Obviously, deception right here. Hold out baits to entice the enemy. This might confuse some people. What it means by hold out baits to entice the enemy. Pretend that you have strategic resources that you desperately need, and then when the enemy comes to seize them, they find out that there was no strategic value and they have just wasted time, money, and energy. It's It's a way to starve it demoralizes your enemy, as well as it means that they've just wasted stuff, and it weakens them overall. Excuse me. I'm just doing something really fast that I just realized I haven't been doing. Oop. There's that nasty echo. Just want to make sure I have some chat so that if you have any questions, I can hopefully answer them or explain. That's my bad. Alright. So hold out baits to entice the enemy, feign disorder, and crush him. Pretend that your army can't work together. When he comes to attack you, surround and destroy him. If he is secure at all points, be prepared for him. If he is in superior strength, evade him. If he is secure at all points, I believe what he means by all points is if he follows all the 7 rules above, or it might also mean if he is secured in a fortress, be prepared for him. If he is in superior strength, evade him. Run his army ragged. Have them try to chase you. Hold out those baits. Make it seem as though you're close by using a small force to think that, oh, the larger force is just around the corner. Hopefully you want that small force to be able to evade the entire army, have no losses, and regroup with your main force later on. But what you want, ideally, is for them to waste time, energy and effort in trying to get to you. If your opponent has choleric temper, so that's kind of a strange word that we don't really use, choleric, basically of an even temper. If they don't get angry, it's very difficult. Seek to irritate him. That's where your spies would come in. Or just observations of how the enemy acts. You want to figure out what makes him act irrationally. And anger is a great way to make someone act irrationally. If you get somebody pissed off, they're going to do something that they wouldn't normally do. Pretend to be weak that he may grow arrogant. So if you... This is kind of where being a general really sucks. If you sacrifice armies or units, the enemy starts to think that you don't know how to fight, and in an attempt to lessen the effort and energy that they expend, will stop fighting as hard. They won't use as many battle tactics because they'll find out that, oh, they can't even handle the most basic and simple things. And that is when they get destroyed. So if he is taking his ease, give him no rest. If his army is relaxing, attack. You don't even have to attack with a full force. If you do hit and run tactics, guerrilla warfare, it can help to disrupt how your army is able to relieve themselves, how they're able to rest, because you can't fight tired. If you're passing out in the middle of a battlefield, you're probably not going to survive. If his forces are united, separate them. A good way to do that would be using guerrilla tactics and attempting to hold a pass, right? If an enemy army is trying to regroup, don't let them. If you can separate them, if you can divide them, you can much easier destroy them. Attack him where he is unprepared, appear where you are not expected. So this takes those spies into account. You need scouting parties, and you need to find out what isn't as well defended as the rest of the army's resources. If they have a reserve unit that's just training but isn't doing anything, attack them. If they have a farm out in the wilderness, attack it. By doing this, they have to divert resources away from where they're at currently to defend those areas. And that can weaken their defenses all across the board, right? If you're doing things to disrupt, let's say, the country, their army has to be diverted in order to defend it. If you're attacking resources, if you're attacking people, right? That's a resource. People are resources, but they're probably one of the most precious resources because it's so difficult to replace people. Because they have experience and knowledge that if they're dead and they don't write it down, you've lost it forever. So, these military devices leading to victory must not be divulged beforehand. Poker face. Don't let your spies get captured. Don't let spies figure out what you're planning to do. In World War II, there was Operation Mincemeat, where the British took a dead body, disguised it as a major, gave this dead body fake plans that said that they were going to invade Greece rather than Sicily. And there's a whole lot of there was a whole lot of things that happened behind the scenes in order to get that information all the way to Hitler, so that they made the choice to divert troops away from Sicily and move them over to Greece, so that when the English or the Allies actually invaded Sicily, there was far fewer defenders. If you want to know more about that, you can look it up online, Operation Mincemeat, or you can watch the Netflix movie that they just added. I don't really recommend watching the movie because it adds a lot of dramatization, and it just for me it feels like it takes away from what Operation Mincemeat was. So I would encourage that you look it up and read about it on a Wikipedia page or maybe a war archive. Alright, so now the general who wins a battle makes many calculations in his temple ere the battle is fought. The general who loses a battle but makes few calculations beforehand, right? Okay. Calculations. You gotta plan. You gotta plan. If you don't, you're gonna lose. Alright, number 2, waging war. Sun Tzu said, in the operations of war, where there are in the field 1,000 swift chariots, as many heavy chariots, and 100,000 mail-clad soldiers, with provisions enough to carry them 1,000 li, the expenditure at home and at the front, including an entertainment of guests, small items such as glue and paint, and sums spent on chariots and armor, will reach the total of 1,000 ounces of silver per day. Such is the cost of raising an army of 100,000 men. When you engage in actual fighting, if victory is long in coming, then men's weapon will grow dull, and their ardor will be dampened. If you lay siege to a town, you will exhaust your strength. Again, if the campaign is protracted, the resources of the state will not be equal to the strain. Now, when your weapons are dulled, your ardor dampened, your strength exhausted, and your treasure spent, other chieftains will spring up to take advantage of your extremity. Then no man, however wise, will be able to avert the consequences that must ensue. Thus, though we have heard of stupid haste in war, cleverness has never been seen associated with long delays. There is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare. It is only one who is thoroughly acquainted with the evils of war that can thoroughly understand the profitable way of carrying it on. The skillful soldier does not raise a second levy, neither are his supply wagons loaded more than twice. Bring war material with you from home, but forage on the enemy. Thus the army will have food enough for its needs. Poverty of the state... What? Hold on, I'm Googling this, because I have no idea how to pronounce that. What? How do you pronounce that? Hold on.
Exchequer.
Exchequer? What is... Okay, what's the definition of this word, then? Exchequer. A royal or national treasury. The poverty of the state exchequer. Exchequer. Okay. Exchequer. That's one I've never heard before. So, hooray for learning. All right. So we've learned a new word, exchequer. That is crazy. Causes an army to be maintained by contributions from a distance. Contributing to maintain an army at a distance causes the people to be impoverished. On the other hand, the proximity of an army causes prices to go up, and high prices cause the people's substance to be drained away. When their substance is drained away, the peasantry will be afflicted by heavy exactions. With this loss of substance and exhaustion of strength, the homes of the people will be stripped bare, and 3/10 of their income will be dissipated, while government expenses for broken chariots, worn-out horses, breastplates and helmets, bows and arrows, spears and shields, protective mantles, draft oxen, and heavy wagons will amount to 4/10 of its total revenue. Hence, a wise general makes a point of foraging on the enemy. 1 cartload of the enemy's provisions is equivalent to 20 of one's own. And likewise, a single pickle of his provender is equivalent to 20 from one's own store. Okay, so just read through a lot. So what he's telling people, telling you, telling everyone, it is expensive and costly to wage war, right? And he breaks it down very well, obviously. And he's going into these details and talking about this because, where was it? Yeah, right here. So, now when your weapons are dulled, your ardor dampened, your strength exhausted, and your treasure spent, other chieftains will spring up to take advantage of your extremity, then no man, however wise, will be able to avert the consequences that must ensue. You may be at war with one person, but if you get to this point, anybody with half a brain is going to take advantage of how weak you have become. So, it's important to be able to maintain the cost of that army. You can't, if you're only making a certain amount of money, you can't have a large army. And even then, when you're actually on march, you have food to think of, you have equipment, you have small things like books, beds, tents. In this day and age, I will say. Nowadays, it's about the same, but it's more of guns, ammo, vehicles, fuel, oil, antifreeze, light bulbs, batteries. The whole supply. We can see what's happening in modern day with Russia. They neglected their supplies, they ran themselves ragged from the start, and they're being pushed back by a smaller army. Right? And Ukraine is actually following this. Where is it? Hence, a wise general makes a point of foraging on the enemy. 1 cartload of the enemy's provisions is equivalent to 20 of one's own. The farmers stealing tanks. That is, case in point, exactly what Ukraine is doing to be successful. They're stealing shit. They are tactically acquiring, if you will, the enemy's supplies and using them against them. They have more equipment and weapons right now than they know what to do with. And honestly, if you really want like an authentic AK-47, go to eBay and look for the Ukrainian sellers. They need the money and you get a cool piece of history. Now, in order to kill the enemy, our men must be roused to anger that there may be advantage from defeating the enemy. They must have their rewards. Therefore, in chariot fighting, when 10 or more chariots have been taken, those should be rewarded who took the first. Our own flag should be substituted for those of the enemy, and the chariots mingled and used in conjunction with ours. The captured soldiers should be kindly treated and kept. This is called using the conquered foe to augment one's own strength. In war, then, let your great object be victory, not lengthy campaigns. Thus it may be known that the leader of armies is the arbiter of the people's fate, the man on whom it depends whether the nation shall be in peace or in peril. Alright. Very straightforward. But this line right here is pretty important. Not necessarily because you don't want to do a war crime, but because captured soldiers can be turned against the people that they once served. It may seem a bit nefarious, but in a time of war, all is fair. Our own flag should be substituted for those of the enemy. This one right here also. Therefore, in chariot fighting, when 10 or more chariots have been taken, those should be rewarded who took the first. I.e., if one soldier takes one, and there's a bunch more that get captured, then he should be rewarded for not only capturing the first, but starting that avalanche of stealing chariots. Or capturing chariots, if you would prefer. Now, in order to kill them, our men must be roused to anger. Because anger gives energy, gives motivation to win. So, while anger can lead to mistakes, it can also give people energy that they didn't know that they had, and thus fight longer and harder. They must have their rewards, i.e., if your men fight hard and they defeat an enemy that is stronger and larger than them, they need to be rewarded, keeping in balance with the rewards and punishment. Let it be known that the leader of armies is the arbiter of the people's fate, the man on whom it depends whether the nation shall be in peace or peril. This is where I can begin to empathize with generals, because they have to choose who lives and dies in war. They have to send good men to die, right? And it's all based off of this. If they lose, their people may be slaughtered, including their families. So they have to do their best to win, which is where your great object be victory, not lengthy campaigns. Don't go to war to show off, because you will lose, and then you'll look like an idiot. Actually, that's just something that you should do in general. Don't show off. Showing off leads to mistakes, and it makes you look foolish. Attack by Stratagem, Chapter 3. Sun Tzu said in The Practical Art of War, "The best thing of all is to take the enemy's country whole and intact. To shatter and destroy it is not so good. So too, it is better to recapture an army entire than to destroy it, to capture a regiment, a detachment, or a company entire than to destroy them. Hence, to fight and conquer in all your battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Thus, the highest form of generalship is to balk the enemy's plans. The next best is to prevent the junction of the enemy's forces. The next in order is to attack the enemy's army in the field, and the worst policy of all is to besiege walled cities." Okay, balk. We need to look that up really fast, because I am not entirely certain what that means. Balk. Hesitate. Make an illegal motion. Let's see. Hesitate or be unwilling to accept an idea or undertaking. Okay, so to make the enemy hesitate so that they don't do something. Frustrate, thwart, foil, baffle. Okay. So to thwart the enemy's plans, to make their plans meaningless because they can't do anything. The next best is to prevent the junction of the enemy's forces, i.e., preventing them from meeting up. Stop them from getting together, because if you can capture a detachment or a company, that's pretty damn good. You've just weakened the enemy, and hopefully done so without losing your own army. So, the next is to attack the enemy's army in the field. So this is something that people think, well, yeah, that's pretty obvious that you're going to be attacking in the army, army head on, but it's over halfway down the list. Because if you have to go to fight, dang it, how do I phrase this? Let me think here for a second. Fighting results in losing on both sides, regardless of who the victor is. You both lose men, you both lose equipment, you both lose morale and loyalty. And the worst policy is to besiege walled cities, because as he spoke of earlier, if you do it, you are losing strength because you have to keep the enemy from getting out. A siege isn't. There is that initial assault, but if that fails, what happens is you have to sit around the city, guard it from anyone entering or exiting, and starve them out. That actually happened in Greece when Athens decided to piss off Sparta. They had a good idea. What they were going to do was to provoke Sparta into attacking them. And their city, their massive city, was on the bay. All they did was wall themselves off, and their navy was superior to Sparta's because of their triremes. They would just ram the enemy ships and sink them. So they were planning to use their navy in order to not only defend, but to ferry supplies in and out of the city. And it would have worked if they hadn't had a plague run through the entire city. Because of the fact that their neighborhoods were so close together, the poor were affected first, and it began to spread. The nobles were the ones who came out relatively unscathed because they were so separated and able to isolate themselves and survive for long. But in the end, they were forced to capitulate, open their gates, and let Sparta come through and take what they wanted in order for the city of Athens to survive. You always want to have a plan for everything if you can help it. So, the rule is not to besiege walled cities if it can possibly be avoided. The preparation of mantlets, movable shelters, and various implements of war will take up 3 whole months, and the piling of mounds over against the walls will take 3 months more. The general, unable to control his irritation, will launch his men to the assault like swarming ants, with the result that 1/3 of his men are slain, while the town still remains untaken. Such are the disastrous effects of a siege. Therefore, the skillful leader subdues the enemy's troops without any fighting. He captures their cities without laying siege to them. He overthrows their kingdom without lengthy operations in the field. With his forces intact, he will dispute the mastery of the empire, and thus, without losing a man, his triumph will be complete. This is the method of attacking by stratagem. It is the rule in war, if our forces are 10 to the enemy's 1, to surround him, if 5 to 1, to attack him, if twice as numerous, to divide our army into 2. If equally matched, we can offer battle. If slightly inferior in numbers, we can avoid the enemy. If quite unequal in every way, we can flee from him. Hence, though an obstinate fight may be made by a small force, in the end it must be captured by the larger force. Now the general is the bulwark of the state. If the bulwark is complete at all points, the state will be strong. If the bulwark is defective, the state will be weak. There are 3 ways in which a ruler can bring misfortune upon his army. By commanding the army to advance or to retreat, being ignorant of the fact that it cannot obey. This is called hobbling the army. By attempting to govern an army in the same way as he administers a kingdom, being ignorant of the conditions which obtain in an army. This causes restlessness in the soldier's mind. By employing the officers of his army without discrimination, through ignorance of the military principle of adaptation to circumstances. This shakes the confidence of the soldiers. But when the army is restless and distrustful, trouble is sure to come from the other feudal princes. This is simply bringing anarchy into the army and flinging victory away. Thus we know that there are 5 essentials for victory. He will win who knows when to fight and when not to fight. He will win who knows how to handle both superior and inferior forces. He will win whose army is animated by the same spirit throughout all its ranks. He will win who, prepared himself, waits to take the enemy unprepared. He will win who has military capacity and is not interfered with by the sovereign. Okay, so it's a lot. Let's go back through it, right? So yeah, where were we? Okay, so that was, I explained that before I read it. I probably should have read it. That right there explains all of it, because if we remember, the lengthy campaign is what causes us to fail in warfare. It's the same idea, same principle in business. If it's a lengthy planning, if it's lengthy to get it moving, you're going to lose money. People will start to get rebellious and run and just leave. Right? The general, unable to control his irritation, whether it's how long it's taking, or the fact that he thinks that his subordinates aren't doing what they want to do as fast as they should, or whatever, will launch his men to the assault like swarming ants. If you've ever played Mount and Blade Bannerlord, the second one, I've played it a lot. What I found is that it's far easier to defend in a siege than it is to attack in a siege. Because I can sit up on a wall and use everything to my advantage. I can knock the ladders back down. I can attack their siege engines that are assaulting me. I've won with like 60 units versus, I think it was 500 at one point. You can win because you have the tactically advantageous position being walled off. You're defended against things like arrows and ballista, catapults, rocks, oil, all that. With the result that 1/3 of his men are slain, while the town still remains untaken. Right? So, subdues the enemy's troops without any fighting, sneaking into a camp in the middle of the night and catch the army sleeping. Catches their cities without laying siege to them. Send in spies, insurgents, in order to open the gates, to allow your army to walk in. He overthrows their kingdom without lengthy operations in the field. If you can keep your army hidden and move into an enemy kingdom and take it over, you're either A, really, really good at being a general, or B, they were absolutely awful at security. So, basically what he's saying here is, congratulations, you did it. So here he's setting out the rules. Right? If our forces are 10 to the enemy's 1, surround him. And the enemy is going to realize that they have no way out, no matter what they do, and they will throw down their weapons and surrender. 5 to 1, to attack him. Makes it pretty simple. You're going to massacre them. If twice as numerous, to divide our army into 2. I think that this is something that is overlooked. You think to yourself to divide your army into 2. Why would you want to do that? You're twice as numerous. Because if you are to attack, and for whatever reason they're better than you, and they beat your army, you have no one to defend with now. It's a lot like chess. Once you move your pawn and attack, he may have a knight waiting that you didn't see to take your pawn. So if equally matched, we can offer battle. If slightly inferior in numbers, we can avoid the enemy. If quite unequal in every way, we can flee from him. If equally matched, we can offer battle, i.e. we've just taken twice as numerous, we've divided it into 2, we've attacked with one army, and we can defend with another, and if that first army loses, we can always move the second army in to mop up the rest of them. But if we're equally matched, we can offer battle. Well, you might think to yourself, well, how can we beat that if it's 50-50? Well, you can change up. If you pay attention to the rules, with heaven and earth, you will come out victorious in all those battles. If you know if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Right? This is from Sun Tzu. On top of that, you also have to take into account the terrain. You have to figure what your army is best at fighting in, where they're best at fighting, what makes up your army, as well as what makes up their army. All these questions that you ask, what can my army do? You have to ask of the enemy army. What can they do? And that's where you can end up not knowing the enemy, because they can conceal their numbers. They can conceal everything. And you can lose sight. You can get... you can become overconfident and be drawn into a trap. We can avoid the enemy. You can run your enemy out. Because you're a smaller army, you need less in order to move. You can get through narrow gaps much faster. If you can run the enemy down, right, they chase you all the way into nightfall, and send some of your people in to attack them at night, you could begin to wear them down. If quite unequal in every way, we can flee from him. Hence, though an obstinate fight may be made by a small force, in the end it must be captured by the larger force. Which is why you flee and avoid. So, by commanding the army to advance or to retreat, being ignorant of the fact that it cannot obey, they're hobbling the army. Not necessarily that they don't want to obey, but they cannot. That's the big thing there. If there's an enemy army in between your army and your objective, and you can't beat that army, and the ruler says, do it or die, you're fucked. You're not gonna win. If you can't get over the mountain that you need to get through, and you have to go around, and the ruler becomes impatient and tries to make the army move, they're hobbling them. Because that can lead to unpreparedness for weather, for surprise attacks, for unforeseen consequences. By attempting to govern an army in the same way as he administers a kingdom, being ignorant of the condition which obtain in an army, this causes restlessness in the soldiers' minds. So this one's going to take a little thinking and reading. Alright, you can't lead an army in the same way that you lead a kingdom. You can't apply the same rules to an army that you do to a state, because that's not how armies work. Armies are built upon discipline. They're built on respect and submissiveness, because we have to be able to, at any moment, turn and do something that we may not necessarily want to do, but because we have respect and discipline, we're going to do it, and this can mean the difference between winning and losing. This causes restlessness in the soldiers' minds. This can lead to issues of disrespect, discord. It makes your army not cohesive, and a cohesive army is important. Because it brings up issues of, well, what about this? What about that? And armies need to be led straight forward, and the soldiers need to understand that they are not citizens, not because we want to strip them of rights, but because it causes causes lack of discipline. And it can mean defeat, i.e. death, right? It means that if you don't do what we tell you to, and you don't do what we say, even if it doesn't make sense to you, you will die. You have to do what you're told. That's just the reality of it. If you don't do what... Because a good general, right? Even if a good general knows exactly what to do, if his army doesn't respond, and it doesn't do what it's told to do, it will fail. Right? By employing the officers of his army without discrimination, through ignorance of the military principle of adaptation to circumstances, this shakes the confidence of the soldiers. If you have somebody who's rigid and can't properly adapt to what's happening around them, soldiers who have seen combat, who know what is needed in combat, if they get an officer who is ignorant and doesn't understand what happens in battle, they're not going to trust them. They're not going to listen to a damn thing that they say. That's shaking the confidence. So, yeah. Alright, but when the army is restless and distrustful, trouble is sure to come from other feudal princes. They might try to swoop in and turn parts of the army against the king, usurping him and becoming king. This is simply bringing anarchy into the army and flinging victory away. So, when to fight and when not to fight. So if we go back up to those rules. So if our forces are 10-1, go right ahead. If we're 5-1, do it. Twice as numerous, do it. Equally matched? Okay, maybe. If we are inferior and we are really bad, don't fight. Avoid until we can regroup and get the numbers we need in order to be able to fight them. So these two go hand in hand. You need to know when you're at advantage against your enemy, able to defeat them, but you also need to know how to move. You need to know how to move and what's needed to move different sizes of armies, because like I said earlier, a smaller army doesn't need as much as a larger army. And a smaller army can get through narrow passageways, forests, other difficult terrain much faster than a large army, because a large army needs more, and with that they may have supplies that can't just be transported on foot. Or if they do get transported on foot, it slows down the army. He will win whose army is animated by the same spirit throughout all its ranks. If your army is consistently motivated, if they have the same amount of motivation from the lowest soldier all the way up to the general, and they are all on the same page and they all want to win, you're good. Because that can keep you going throughout some of the harshest times that you will face as a soldier. Or that you will in an office environment. See, you can connect these things. The art of war is not just for the art of war, but can be utilized, and you can take this philosophy and use it in wherever you're working. He will win who prepared himself, waits to take the enemy unprepared, i.e. lays plans, and is able to attack, adjust, and shift if the enemy is unprepared. He will win who has the military capacity and is not interfered with by the sovereign. Pretty simple, because a general knows more than a president. And if the president's trying to tell the troops what to do, no, it's not going to work. Because in today's society, at least in the United States, the president is chosen by the people, and it's a political affair. The generals have moved up through the rank through experience and learning and knowledge. They know way more about waging war and what militaries and what terrain, everything about waging war. Spies, everything. A president gets a blurb. So he can say, I want this. It's up to the generals to make the plans to make that happen. Hence the saying, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. What does it mean to know yourself? You need to know what your army is capable of. And you have to be realistic. If people are feeding you a bunch of lies and bullshit, trying to make themselves look better, get rid of them immediately. Because they can no longer be trusted to give you this and let you know yourself. Knowing the enemy is obviously very important, because if you can do this one, you will win at every time, and you can achieve supreme excellence. Because remember, supreme excellence comes in breaking the enemy's will without fighting. If you can run them ragged, if you can reduce their supplies, if you can sow distrust and discourse amongst their army, you can make them surrender and walk away without ever firing a shot. Alright, let's move on. Tactical dispositions. Sun Tzu said, the good fighters of old first put themselves beyond the possibility of defeat, and then waited for an opportunity of defeating the enemy. To secure ourselves against defeat lies in our own hands, but the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself. Thus, the good fighter is able to secure himself against defeat, but cannot make certain of defeating the enemy. Hence the saying, one may know how to conquer without being able to do it. Security against defeat implies defensive tactics. Ability to defeat the enemy means taking the offensive. Standing on the defensive indicates insufficient strength. Attacking, a superabundance of strength. The general who is skilled in defense hides in the most secret recesses of the earth. He who is skilled in attack flashes forth from the topmost heights of heaven. Thus, on the one hand, we have ability to protect ourselves, on the other, a victory that is complete. To see a victory only when it is within the ken of the common herd is not the acme of excellence. Neither is it the acme of excellence when you fight and conquer, and the whole empire says, "Well done." To lift an autumn hair is no sign of great strength. To see the sun and moon is no sign of sharp sight. To hear the noise of thunder is no sign of a quick ear. What the ancients called a clever fighter is one who not only wins, but excels in winning with ease. Hence his victories bring him neither reputation for wisdom nor credit for courage. He wins his battles by making no mistakes. Making no mistakes is what establishes the certainty of victory, for it means conquering an enemy that is already defeated. Hence the skillful fighter puts himself into a position which makes defeat impossible and does not miss the moment for defeating the enemy. Thus it is that in war the victorious strategist only seeks battle after the victory has been won, whereas he who is destined to defeat first fights and afterwards looks for victory. Okay, there wasn't really a whole lot in this that I felt needed to be explained because he's done a fantastic job of explaining it. Let's see here. I'm just kind of skimming through this again. Yeah, so the general who's skilled defense hides in the most... Yeah, again, that's really straightforward. Okay, so what he's talking about here in this sentence, yeah, that's a whole sentence right there. To lift an autumn hair is no sign of great strength. To see the sun and moon is no sign of sharp sight. To hear the noise of thunder is no sign of quick ear. Just because you can do these things doesn't make you great. So hence his victories bring him neither reputation for wisdom nor credit for courage. I.e., the victory doesn't come from defeating the enemy in battle. It comes from the no mistakes part. Making no mistakes is what established being able to maneuver your army into the positions that they need to be at the exact moments in order to exploit weakness and defeat the army. It's about maneuvering yourself and maneuvering your enemy. A lot like in chess, or as I've learned in rolling. Like when you're like in MMA, when they're down on the ground, they're grappling with each other. You want to try to maneuver your opponent into a position where you want them to be. And ideally, the position that you want them to be in is the one that's going to win you the fight. Because there were a lot of times when guys who knew a lot more than I did would leave something open, and obviously I would go for it because I didn't have a whole lot of experience with it. They'd leave an opening, I'd take it, and it would mean that I am now exactly where they want me to be, and they'd choke me out. Alright. Okay, I need to use the restroom really fast. So, go ahead and swap over to an intermission. You can go ahead, grab whatever you want. Food, water. Take a little break here. And we'll come back and we'll keep going, because I like this. This is some fun stuff. Okay, alright. I am back from my little bathroom slash food break. Does anyone have any questions or anything that they want to talk about or re-go over before we continue on? Give you a little bit of time just in case, because I know that there's latency. Give it a second. Because, so this is really the first time that I've ever delved into this as deep as this. So I am really enjoying this. So I like to learn. And this, I think, is very good. Because if you listen to this and pay attention, if you go play something like Warhammer Total War, I think that's the one that's called, or any kind of 4X game, this stuff will come into play. Because I've played 4X games before, and I've always lost. Or at the very least, I've barely scraped by on easy enemies. And I think it's because I don't follow this. Or at the very least, I just don't think about things beyond the basic. So this is definitely something that I think will help me. But I need to read more of this, and probably memorize it. Or just at the very least have it open when I'm playing a 4X game and go, okay, I'm losing here. What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the problem? Uh-oh. Alright, so let's continue. The consummate leader cultivates the moral law and strictly adheres to method and discipline. Thus, it is in his power to control success. In respect of military method, we have, firstly, measurement, secondly, estimation of quantity, thirdly, calculation, fourthly, balancing of chances, fifthly, victory. Measurement owes excuse me, my tongue tripped over itself. Measurement owes its existence to earth, estimation of quantity to measurement, calculation to estimation of quantity, balancing of chances to calculation, and victory to balancing of chances. Okay, alright. So it's like backwards. He's talking backwards here, basically. Balancing of chances to victory, calculation of chances to balancing, estimation of quantity to calculation, measurement of quantity to estimation. Ugh. Okay, that's... This one's really making my brain jump around here. So measurement owes its existence to earth. Estimation of quantity owes its existence to measurement. Calculation owes its existence to estimation of quantity. Balancing of chances owes its existence to calculation, and victory owes its existence to balancing of chances. Okay, so if you add that whole owes its existence to in between everything, it makes a lot more sense. Estimation of quantity owes its existence to measurement. You have to measure the things, and measurement owes its existence to earth. You have to measure the earth in order to get an estimation of quantity. Calculation to the estimation of quantity. We have to calculate quantity, calculate troops, movements, supplies, balancing of chances to calculation. So we have to use the calculation based off of the estimation of quantity, based off of the measurement, based off of the earth, in order to balance the chances, because we have to ensure that we're taking risks when we know that we have the best chance to do so. And victory owes its existence to balancing of chances. So you can win by the balancing of chances. Okay, that took a second, and I think my brain might need to move on because holy crap, I'm confused. A victorious army opposed to a routed one is as a pound's weight placed in a scale against a single grain. The onrush of a conquering force is like the bursting of pent-up waters into a chasm 1,000 fathoms deep. Okay, so this one is... This is still in the stratagem. Yeah, this is still stratagem. Alright, so moral law and strictly adheres to method and discipline. Moral law, morale, kind of, well, it's not the same, but moral law is the rules based off of what is right and what is wrong, based off of your morals. And if it doesn't make sense, if it's obviously something that is favoring one group versus another, you lose the cohesiveness, you lose trust, and you lose respect. Method and discipline, that is like your rules of engagement, your standard operating procedures. Your discipline is ensuring that people are following the rules set out and being able to listen and respond when orders are given as quickly as possible. So if you have an army that responds quickly to whatever is said and accurately, does everything you tell them to do, you can win very easily. And then, so then military method, measurement, secondly, estimation of quantity. Okay, so method, he's talking about, so all of this is just this right here. The measurement, this is all your calculation. This is where how you fight, how you're going to fight. So basically, based off of the terrain, you have to do all of this here. Well, not necessarily do all of this, because this is more just explaining what this is. But if I'm understanding this correctly, this talks about knowing the earth, because the earth leads to victory in a very roundabout way. But if you can measure the earth, you can get all of this. You can balance your chances and win. You gotta make estimations, calculations, quantity, balancing the chances, all that. That's your method. How you fight on different terrains. I'm almost positive that it's how you fight on different terrain. This right here, if I'm not mistaken, is metaphors. A victorious army opposed to a routed one is as a pound's weight placed on the scale against a single grain. The onrush of a conquering force is like the bursting of pent-up waters into a chasm 1,000 fathoms deep. It's unstoppable. Alright, Chapter 5, Energy. Sun Tzu said, the control of a large force is the same principle as the control of a few men. It is merely a question of dividing up their numbers. Fighting with a large army under your command is no wise different from fighting with a small one. It is merely a question of instituting signs and signals. To ensure that your whole host may withstand the brunt of the enemy's attack and remain unshaken, this is effected by maneuvers direct and indirect. That the impact of your army may be like a grindstone dashed against an egg. This is effected by the science of weak points and strong. In all fighting, the direct method may be used for joining battle, but indirect methods will be needed in order to secure victory. Indirect tactics, efficiently applied, are inexhaustible as heaven and earth, unending as the flow of rivers and streams, like the sun and moon. They end but to begin anew, like the four seasons, they pass away to return once more. Okay, yeah, we're going to keep going here. There are not more than 5 musical notes, yet the combinations of these 5 give rise to more melodies than can ever be heard. There are not more than 5 primary colors, blue, yellow, red, white, and black. Yet in combination they produce more hues than can ever be seen. There are not more than 5 cardinal tastes, sour, acrid, salt, sweet, bitter. Yet combinations of them yield more flavors than can ever be tasted. In battle, there are not more than 2 methods of attack, the direct and the indirect. Yet these 2 in combination give rise to an endless series of maneuvers. The direct and the indirect lead on to each other in turn. It is like moving in a circle. You never come to an end, but who can exhaust the possibilities of their combination? The onset of troops is like the rush of a torrent, which will even roll stones along in its course. The quality of decision is like the well-timed swoop of a falcon, which enables it to strike and destroy its victim. Therefore, the good fighter will be terrible in his onset and prompt in his decision. Okay, alright. Some things might be a little confusing. So, So weak points and strong. If an enemy is attacking a weak point, maneuver your army so that they may be facing a strong point of your army. Do not let them hit you where it hurts. Indirect methods. In all fighting, the direct method may be used for joining battle, but indirect methods will be needed in order to secure fighting, to secure victory. Direct methods, i.e., engaging in battle, fighting the enemy face to face. Indirect methods, sabotaging supply lines. Whatever. So, if I'm understanding this correctly, direct methods are for attacking the enemy's army. Indirect methods are everything that sustain that army. So attacking their general, for example, and killing the general. Which, if you can, wow, you've got a really good assassin. What he's getting at here, which I think is pretty straightforward, you can do the direct and indirect in an incomprehensible amount of different ways. Like, there are so many different ways that you can both attack directly and indirectly. So, therefore, the good fighter will be terrible at his onset and prompt in his decisions. Hit him hard when you do, and if you need to make a choice, do so quickly, right? In such a way that you will strike and destroy your victim. Energy may be likened to the bending of a crossbow, decision to the releasing of a trigger. Amid the turmoil and tumult of a battle, there may be seeming disorder and yet no real disorder at all. Amid confusion and chaos, your array may be without head or tail, yet it will be proof against defeat. Sorry, just heard some noises. Hold on for a minute. There appears to be some nonsense going on outside. I need to close my window. My apologies. I believe some guys were working on their vehicle outside. That's what it was. Okay, where were we? Amid the turmoil and tumult of battle, there may be seeming disorder, and yet no real disorder at all. Amid confusion and chaos, your array may be without head or tail, yet it will be proof against defeat. Simulated disorder postulates perfect discipline. Simulated fear postulates courage. Simulated weakness postulates strength. Hiding order beneath the cloak of disorder is simply a question of subdivision. Concealing courage under a show of timidity presupposes a fund of latent energy. Masking strength with weakness is to be affected by tactical dispositions. Thus, one who is skillful at keeping the enemy on the move maintains deceitful appearances, according to which the enemy will act. He sacrifices something that the enemy may snatch at it. By holding out baits, he keeps him on the march. Then, with a body of picked men, he lies in wait for him. The clever combatant looks to the effect of combined energy and does not require too much from individuals, hence his ability to pick out the right men and utilize combined energy. When he utilizes combined energy, his fighting men become as it were like unto rolling logs or stones, for it is the nature of a log or stone to remain motionless on level ground and to move when on a slope. If four-cornered, to come to a standstill, but if round-shaped, to go rolling down. Thus the energy developed by good fighting men is as the momentum of a round stone rolled down a mountain thousands of feet in height. So much on the subject of energy. Okay. Wow, that's quite a bit. So where was it? Okay, by holding out baits, he keeps him on the march. He sacrifices something that the enemy may snatch at it. He's It's the whole deceit. All warfare is based on deception. You're trying to trick your enemy into expending energy going after something that's not actually there, or that is there but is inconsequential in the long run. By holding out baits, i.e., those sacrifices, he keeps them moving. Then, with the body of picked men, he lies in wait for him. Ambushes. Yeah, I think that's just about it. But basically, when he's talking about that, the energy. How do I explain? Put this into my words here. Okay, so the clever combatant looks to the effect of combined energy and does not require too much from individuals. It's like how Achilles was used. He was such a great warrior that they used him so much for one-on-one combat in order to settle disputes. I don't really actually know where that story went. I just remember he died because he got hit in the ankle or the heel. But if you use somebody like that over and over and over, you're expending their energy and can eventually lose. But if you use teamwork, the right men, a body of picked men, that's the right men, and use their combined energy, the right men will change as the war wages on, because the first group of right men will get tired and you will need a new group of men. You have to know how to manage their energy levels, because if you keep using the same people over and over and over, they're going to run out of energy, pass out, and die on the battlefield. Alright, okay. Chapter 6, Weak Points and Strong. Okay, so that's going into what was talked about with the energy. Whoever is first in the field and awaits the coming of the enemy will be fresh for the fight. Whoever is second in the field has to hasten to battle, will arrive exhausted. Therefore, the clever combatant imposes his will on the enemy, but does not allow the enemy's will to be imposed on him. By holding out advantages to him, he can cause the enemy to approach of his own accord, or by inflicting damage, he can make it impossible for the enemy to draw near. If the enemy is taking his ease, he can harass him. If well supplied with food, he can starve him out. If quietly encamped, he can force him to move. Appear at points which the enemy must hasten to defend. March swiftly to places where you are not expected. An army may march great distances without distress if it marches through country where the enemy is not. You can be sure of succeeding in your attacks if you only attack places which are undefended. You can ensure the safety of your defense if you only hold positions that cannot be attacked. Hence that general is skillful in attack, whose opponent does not know what to defend, and he is skillful in defense, whose opponent does not know what to attack. O divine art of subtlety and secrecy! Through you we learn to be invisible, through you inaudible, and hence we can hold the enemy's fate in our hands. You may advance and be absolutely irresistible if you make for the enemy's weak points. You may retire and be safe from pursuit if your movements are more rapid than those of the enemy. If we wish to fight, the enemy can be forced to an engagement even though he be sheltered behind a high rampart and a deep ditch. All we need do is attack some other place that he will be obliged to relieve. If we do not wish to fight, we can prevent the enemy from engaging us, even though the lines of our encampment be merely traced out on the ground. All we need do is to throw something odd and unaccountable in his way. By discovering the enemy's dispositions and remaining invisible ourselves, we can keep our forces concentrated while the enemy's must be divided. We can form a single united body while the enemy must be split up into fractions. Hence there will be a whole pitted against separate parts of a whole, which means that we shall be many to the enemy's few. And if we are able to thus if we are able thus to attack an inferior force with a superior one, our opponents will be in dire straits. The spot where we intend to fight must not be made known, for then the enemy will have to prepare against a possible attack at several different points, and his forces being thus distributed in many directions, the numbers we shall have to face at any given point will be proportionately few. For should the enemy strengthen his van, he will weaken his rear. Should he strengthen his rear, he will weaken his van. Should he strengthen to his left, he will weaken his right. Should he strengthen his right, he will weaken his left. If he sends reinforcements everywhere, he will everywhere be weak. Numerical weakness comes from having to prepare against possible attacks. Numerical strength from compelling our adversary to make these preparations against us. Knowing the place and the time of the coming battle, we may concentrate from the greatest distances in order to fight. But if neither time nor place be known, then the left wing will be impotent to succor the right equally impotent to succor the left, the van unable to relieve the rear, or the rear to support the van. How much more so if the furthest portions of the army are anything under 100 li apart, and even the nearest are separated by several li. Though according to my estimate, the soldiers of you exceeded our own in number. That shall advantage them nothing in the matter of victory. I say then that victory can be achieved. Though the enemy be stronger in numbers, we may prevent him from fighting. Scheme so as to discover his plans and the likelihood of their success. Rouse him and learn the principle of his activity or inactivity. Force him to reveal himself so as to find out his vulnerable spots. Carefully compare the opposing army with your own, so that you may know where strength is superabundant and where it is deficient. In making tactical dispositions, the highest pitch you can attain is to conceal them. Conceal your dispositions, and you will be safe from the prying of the subtlest spies, from the machinations of the wisest brain. How victory may be produced for them out of the enemy's own tactics, that is what the multitude cannot comprehend. All men can see the tactics whereby I conquer, but what none can see is the strategy out of which victory is evolved. Do not repeat the tactics which have gained you one victory, but let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances. Military tactics are like unto water, for water in its natural course runs away from high places and hastens downwards. So in war, the way is to avoid what is strong and to strike at what is weak. Water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. The soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe whom he is facing. Therefore, just as water retains no constant shape, so in warfare there are no constant conditions. He who can modify his tactics in relation to his opponent, and thereby succeed in winning, may be called a heaven-born captain. Okay, I gotta take a quick pause there, because holy crap, things are starting to make sense now. Because, yeah, I've, starting to realize my tactics and how I fight in 4X games. Not very good. I have a really bad tendency to attack the enemy head on, even if, like, I think that, oh yeah, I got good numbers. So I was playing a game called Sons of the Solar Empire. I don't know if people have played it. Space game. You can jump your ships into different gravity wells around planets, and then you can engage in combat there and all this. So I would go and build up these massive fleets, but I would keep them in one fleet or two if I was feeling real adventurous, and I'd have them run out and slowly start to attack the enemy. But if they started to attack me in a place that I wasn't expecting, I would have to completely move my army all the way back around, which was weakening my attack force. And there was one instance where I knew that they were going to attack me, and so I had a force waiting. They attacked me, and then I started to lose because I didn't have enough units. So I brought my main force in, at which point they brought their combined main force in and absolutely crushed my fleet. I barely won that one because I did some bullshit and blew up their sun. I didn't blow up their sun, excuse me. I used a... what was it? I don't remember exactly, but basically I shot their planes with a massive gun, and it helped to defeat their defenses, and I won like that. But this really explains it, of attacking what's undefended in order to force the enemy to move their army, tire them out in an attempt to defend it, then retreating as soon as the enemy appears in order to keep them running around, and then attacking what they just left or something farther away, but continuously attacking in an unprepared fashion. What he's also talking about, browse him and learn the principle of his activity or inactivity. Force him to reveal himself so as to find out his vulnerable spots. When you fight on the field, have somebody far away watching and observing everything that they do and how they fight. If you can figure out how they're fighting, you can then turn that against them. You can lay traps and wait for them to maneuver in the ways that you've seen them do time and time again. Carefully compare the opposing army with your own so that you know where strength is super abundant and where it is deficient. Like, with their tactics, if you take a look at their fighting forces, and you figure out that, oh wow, these guys are really good on chariot, and we're not good enough to fight them chariot to chariot, put them in positions where they can't use their chariots. In making tactical disposition, the highest pitch you can attain is to conceal them. Where is it? Let's see. Do not repeat the tactics which have gained you one victory, but let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances. So, like, if you're playing Pokemon, turn-based combat, if you know that there's one move that always wins, don't always use it. Hell, once you use it the first time, don't use it don't use it again. But, I mean, that's really Pokemon, that's really one, because enemies don't really, at least NPCs don't tailor their team and their moveset to what your team is. They do that in PvP, in, what is that? I don't remember the tournament, or not the tournament, but the type of, what, you know what I'm talking about, though. Because if the enemy can see what you're using, they can create a team, figure out what movesets that would be good to defeat you with. Don't use the same tactics twice. Don't repeat it. If you let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances. Right? If the circumstances happen to match up, be very, very cautious if you think that you should use the same tactics, because if you have an infinite variety of circumstances and you run into the exact same circumstances two times, that second time is a trap. I guarantee it. All right. Yeah, that was eye-opening. I'm going to take a bite of my food here. Any sort of humble bragging. What is it? Was it men know the methods and how I win, or something like that, but he's kind of got room to talk. He was undefeated, if I'm not mistaken. With 5 elements, water, fire, wood, metal, earth, are not always equally predominant. The 4 seasons the 4 seasons make way for each other in turn. There are short days and long. The moon has its periods of waning and waxing. Okay, so I think, yeah, I prematurely ended that, but I don't know. He's making a metaphor of the circumstances in war, because days change. They're hot, they're cold, and that's your heaven there, and that's what you need to take into account whenever you're going to war. Chapter 7, Maneuvering. Sun Tzu said, in war, the general receives his commands from the sovereign. Having collected an army and concentrated his forces, he must blend and harmonize the different elements, therefore, before pitching his camp. After that comes tactical maneuvering, that which there is nothing more difficult. The difficulty of tactical maneuvering consists in turning the devious into the direct and misfortune into gain. Thus, take a long and circuitous route. After enticing the enemy out of the way, and though starting after him to contrive to reach the goal before him, shows knowledge of the artifice of deviation. Maneuvering with an army is advantageous, with an undisciplined multitude most dangerous. If you set a fully equipped army in march in order to snatch an advantage, the chances are that you will be too late. On the other hand, to detach a flying column for the purpose involves the sacrifice of its baggage and stores. Thus, if you order your men to roll up their buff coats and make forced marches without halting day or night, covering double the usual distance at a stretch, doing 100 li in order to wrest an advantage, the leaders of all your 3 divisions will fall into the hands of the enemy. The stronger men will be in front, the jaded ones will fall behind, and on this plan, only 1/10 of your army will reach its destination. If you march 50 li in order to outmaneuver the enemy, you will lose the leader of your 1st division, and only half your force will reach the goal. If you march 30 li with the same object, 2/3 of your army will arrive. We may take it then that an army without its baggage train is lost. Without provisions, it is lost. Without bases of supply, it is lost. Again, Russia. We cannot enter into alliances until we are acquainted with the designs of our neighbors. We are not fit to lead an army on the march unless we are familiar with the face of the country, its mountains and forests, its pitfalls and precipices, its marshes and swamps. We shall be unable to turn natural advantage to account unless we make use of local guides. In war, practice dissimulation, and you will succeed. Whether to concentrate or to divide your troops must be decided by circumstances. Let your rapidity be that of the wind, your compactness that of the forest. In raiding and plundering be like fire, is immovability like a mountain. I don't know why it's worded like that. It's kind of confusing. In raiding and plundering be like fire, is immovability like a mountain. Let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night, and when you move, fall like a thunderbolt. When you plunder a countryside, let the spoil be divided amongst your men. When you capture new territory, cut it up into allotments for the benefit of the soldiery. Ponder and deliberate before you make a move. He will conquer who has learnt the artifice of deviation, such as the art of maneuvering. The Book of Army Management says, on the field of battle, the spoken word does not carry far enough, hence the institution of gongs and drums. Nor can ordinary objects be seen clearly enough, hence the institution of banners and flags. Gongs and drums, banners and flags, are means whereby the ears and eyes of the host may be focused on one particular point. The host, thus forming a single united body, is it impossible either for the brave to advance alone, or for the cowardly to retreat alone. This is the art of handling large masses of men. In night fighting, then, make much use of signal fires and drums. In fighting by day, of flags and banners as a means of influencing the ears and eyes of your army. A whole army may be robbed of its spirit. A commander-in-chief may be robbed of his presence of mind. Now a soldier's spirit is keenest in the morning, by noonday it has begun to flag, and in the evening his mind is bent only on returning to camp. A clever general, therefore, avoids an army when its spirit is keen, but attacks it when it is sluggish and inclined to return. This is the art of studying moods. Disciplined and calm, to await the appearance of disorder and hubbub amongst the enemy. This is the art of retaining self-possession. To be near the goal while the enemy is still far from it. To wait at ease while the enemy is toiling and struggling. To be well fed while the enemy is famished. This is the art of husbanding one's strength. To refrain from intercepting an enemy whose banners are in perfect order. To refrain from attacking an army drawn up in a calm and confident array. This is the art of studying circumstances. It is a military axiom not to advance uphill against the enemy, nor to oppose him when he comes downhill. Do not pursue an enemy who simulates flight. Do not attack soldiers whose temper is keen. Do not swallow bait offered by the enemy. Do not interfere with an army that is returning home. When you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard. Such is the art of warfare. What he's talking about here in this last part, do not press a desperate foe too hard. If you offer an army no way out, they will fight to the death, and you will lose more than you bargained for. You're going to lose a lot more people. Excuse me, trying to eat dinner here. So, what I'm still a little confused on is the marching, is the maneuvering here. Okay. Okay. Practice the simulation and you will succeed. Whether to concentrate or divide your troops must be decided by circumstances. Okay. So rather than, I think it's forcing your... doing a forced march. I wonder if he's attempting... or if it's... Because I don't know if there's... Okay, war... Tactical maneuvering. Okay, so... Thus to take a long and circuitous route after enticing the enemy out of the way, and though starting after him, to contrive to reach the goal before him shows knowledge of the artifice of deviation. Maneuvering with an army is advantageous. With an undisciplined multitude, most dangerous. If you set a fully equipped army in march in order to snatch an advantage, the chances are that you will be too late. On the other hand, to detach a flying column for the purpose involves the sacrifice of its baggage and stores. Thus, if you order your men to roll up their buff coats and make forced marches without halting day or night, covering double the usual distance at a stretch, doing 100 li in order to wrest an advantage, the leaders of all your 3 divisions will fall into the hands of the enemy. Okay. I'm not entirely certain what the answer here is. I think that's still something that's down to the circumstances of the battle. To try to get to an advantage without losing your army. Because maneuvering with an army is advantageous. With an undisciplined multitude, most dangerous. So I wonder if this is more, instead of going to an advantage, create for the enemy a false advantage, have them move in there, surround, attack, force them to retreat, wear them down, and then move to the advantage. I think... because this is talking about how you march. So your army needs to have baggage train, it needs to be supplied as it moves. So we can't enter into alliances until we are acquainted with the designs of our neighbors, i.e., what are the peaceful people, or the neutral parties nearby planning to do? Because if you start to move through their territory and they've betrayed you without you knowing, you're kind of fucked. Okay, so we're not fit to lead an army on the march unless we are familiar with the face of the country, right? You need to have accurate maps. You need to know the ins and outs. You have to have local guides, because they're going to know the place far better than any of your scouts. And so, whether the concentrated or divided troops must be divided by circumstances. Decided by circumstances. Okay. This is more of when you do things. Okay, so I think this is the ultimate answer here. Ponder and deliberate before you make a move. Never make a move out of haste, but never take too long. Well, I don't know how you could know it would be too long. I think it comes down more to experience. So this is talking about how to control your army to ensure that people are doing what they are supposed to be doing, and they listen and maneuver when you tell them to. So the soldier's spirit is keenest in the morning. By noonday it has begun to flag, and in the evening his mind is bent only on returning to camp. Avoids an army when the spirit is keen. Never attack in the morning. Attack at night, in the evening. Okay. Okay. Do not swallow bait offered by the enemy. Do not interfere with an army that is returning home. Okay. Alright, I think that answers my question. Chapter 8. Variation in Tactics. We're about halfway through. Ooh. Yeah, we're about halfway through here. I think this is a good place to go ahead and end off. We've been going for almost 2 hours now. If you're watching, I appreciate you listening along. This is kind of an experiment on my end, because I've been doing the whole torture streams. And whereas that's a workout for the body, we need a workout for the mind, and I think that this is a great way to do it. Because trying to understand what Sun Tzu is talking about, I think it's a good way to flex your mind, get those brain muscles moving, to learn something. It's always something good. If you want to be smarter, if you want to have better memory, better focus, read books. You can do fiction, non-fiction. If you want to get smarter, pick up a chemistry book, pick up a math book. Something to do with science or tactics, war, history. Something that's non-fiction, right? That's real. That's to do with the world around us. If you want to have better creativity, read non-fiction. You know? Oh, damn it, there's a fucking... But it is my hope that this helps to break up the monotony of just doing torture streams. I'll be back doing that on Monday. I'm going to take a break tomorrow because it's Sunday, and I go back to work on Monday. So I will be taking the time for me, and I'm probably going to be reading a book, or playing video games, or watching YouTube or something. But this is going to be all for me. So I hope you all enjoyed this and had a fun time learning along with me, because I know I've definitely learned and realized a lot. And warfare is multifaceted. Circumstances control everything. Alright, you all have a good rest of your night. And if you're watching this afterwards, have a good rest of your morning, day, evening, night, whatever. Hope you feel better soon. Bye.